What is going on, everybody? Hope you guys are doing well out there. That is right. It is Friday, and the most important day of the week means it is time for our FAANG Stock Recap show, where we run down all the news, all the information, and the stock price charts of all the major FAANG stocks, including Microsoft and Tesla. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping. You'll notice that I'm recording this video and it's uploaded a little bit later than normal. I've got a commitment at my son's school for the next few weeks, so this video will be delayed up probably around 3:30 Pacific time, 6:30 Eastern time. Just wanted to throw that out for all of you out there. Let's kick things off with Facebook. Started the week at 310, slid down a little bit to 306. Facebook is claiming that they have achieved 100% renewable energy in terms of running their operations. I wonder if this means their servers as well, because man, you got to have a gigantic amount of servers to run the Facebook platform. I'm assuming that's what this means as well. So while you're surfing Facebook, you were doing so on renewable energy. We're doing that here on the show too. I just had solar put on my roof a few months ago, so we're 100% renewable as well here on the Investor Channel. Facebook is testing a new video speed dating app. I've got a couple buddies that would be excited about this one. It looks like you set up a 4-minute speed dating. You initially meet somebody online with a 4-minute speed dating video conference, and then that subsequent, you can do a 10-minute second date. And that is when you can exchange contact information. So you got to spend 14 minutes with either a young lady or a young man on video before you're able to get their contact information. Whether or not this is an attractive option for the single folks out there, I'll let you decide. I'm happily married, so we'll see what happens there. Moving on to Apple. Start of the week at 132, just drifted higher to 134. Apple's reporting earnings 429, so about 2 weeks from now. Facebook's on 428. Apple had quite a bit of news, actually. It appears that the Apple car has found a manufacturing partner with LG and Magna. So Apple already deals with LG with some display stuff. So it's interesting. It could be that Apple gets better deals, maybe a deeper partnership with people that already make components and parts for its phone, and then they can roll kind of an EV or an electric vehicle into that. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to pull this off, but the Korean Times are reporting that this is a deal that should be announced and finalized by July. So it looks like it appears that Apple is going full force on this EV. We're going to see what happens to the stock chart with this one. Obviously, you'll be here on the channel. We'll be following it closely. Can this be the catalyst to put a different kind of valuation on Apple? We'll see what happens. Apple Music pays artists twice as much as Spotify per stream. They claim that they pay 1 cent per stream, and that Spotify pays about a third or half that, although the music industry is saying that Apple's payments actually dip lower than that stated rate. So who's telling the truth here? I don't know. I just know 1 cent per stream, unless you're streaming quite a few streams, probably not going to make a lot of money doing that. Now, Apple will host an event on 420. Okay, according to Siri. So if you ask Siri, they will say the next special event is on Tuesday, April 20th, which is 420 in Cupertino, California. But the website currently has no mention of the event. Now, what is planned to be released is 2 new iPad Pro models. Despite we have a display shortage, we have chip shortage, we have got all kinds of shortages here in the supply chain for Apple, but it appears 2 new Apple iPro models. I have the original iPad Pro, and I don't feel like upgrading. It's amazing how well that piece of equipment has continued to work. If you don't have an iPad Pro, it is something I would recommend. It is very, very nice. Now, moving on to Amazon. Start of the week at $3,389. Ended up about $10 to about, we'll call that $3,400 per share. Really interesting when we get over the stock chart with Amazon. They're reporting again in about 2 weeks' time, a little less than that, 13 days, on 4/29. Amazon is testing a service where delivery drivers would assemble furniture and other appliances in your house. Obviously, there's stuff like this already. I just had a Peloton treadmill delivered to my house maybe a week or two ago. Same kind of deal. XPO Logistics, which is a public company, I actually have a couple shares of that company as well. They delivered it. They set it all up and it was all ready to go. So Amazon kind of getting into that business, could it given them a leg up on like a Wayfair or something like that, which is kind of taking some market share against kind of furniture and larger items? Be interesting to see if Amazon is able to really get behind this type of thing. Now, Amazon's almost former CEO and founder, Jeff Bezos, outlines its goal to create Earth's best employer. So Amazon has always revolved around being a customer-centric company, and now Bezos, on his last shareholder letter on the way out, is saying, hey, we want to be the best employer on Earth because they have so many employees. And there was also that failed Bessemer, Alabama warehouse unionized vote that we talked about on the last week's show as well. On the business side, Bezos mentioned that Prime subscribers now total just 200 million. That's up 50 million since the start of last year. That is a massive base of people that are just pouring money into Amazon. Now, moving on to Netflix. Start of the week at 553, slid down when we get over the stock chart with Netflix. It is kind of interesting what is happening. Netflix is reporting on 420, so the same day we'll have an Apple event as well. $546 is where Netflix is trading at the current time. Now, Netflix churn is staying low. Churn is the amount of people that basically cancel, if you're not familiar with that industry term, and it is staying low despite competition and things like that, and maybe people, watching everything that they possibly wanted in quarantine. But it appears that data analytics are pointing to low churn, which should be beneficial to Netflix and its shareholders. Now, Netflix is expected to cruise past its difficult year-over-year pandemic comparisons. Okay, so we know that Netflix in particular, and probably Amazon as well, are probably the two companies out of this group that we analyze on a weekly basis here on Friday are running into the hardest comparisons, okay, because Amazon's business just absolutely blew up when the pandemic hit, and so did Netflix. But if they're able to show, look, we not only captured a bunch of business back then, but we're retaining those customers, that will be big. And now, obviously, something that we've talked about here a lot on the channel, especially when we do the Netflix specific videos every 3 months on their quarterly earnings. Really, all it's about is this pricing power. Okay, Netflix has a ton of subscribers. They're still seeing growth in the international markets, but here in North America, United States and Canada, that growth is already kind of peaked out, in my opinion and other people's opinion. The way they're going to make more money is by raising price. And so we'll see if they're able to do that, especially considering all the competition that's out there in the streaming space as well. Moving on to Google. Started the week at $2,253. Google's kind of reminding me of like Dogecoin right now. It just keeps going up and up and up. It's the end of the week at $2,282. Google is reporting on 4/27, so a day before Facebook and 2 days before Apple and Amazon. So it'll be interesting to see if they're able to hold this price. I mean, this stock has basically been at all-time highs for a while now. It's just been pushing the range. When we go over the stock chart, we'll take a deeper look at that. Not a lot of news, ironically, out of Google this week. Moving on to Microsoft, some big news coming out of Microsoft. First things first, they started the week at 255, ended the week up at about 260, basically at an all-time high again, or at least a 52-week high here on Microsoft as well. Buoyed by, we've got Surface Laptop 4 coming out. It has both Intel and AMD processors. I know a lot of you watching right now could be potential. You might own AMD and Intel, or one or the other. If you're like me, you own some AMD shares. It appears that the AMD models are starting at $999, whereas the Intel models are $1299. So it could be that AMD picks up some market share here because, people might be more interested in an entry-level model than paying a couple $100 more. Microsoft is acquiring Nuance Communications, which was ticker symbol NUAN, for just $19.7 billion. That was about $56 per share. Nuance was trading 23% lower than that, when Microsoft made the deal. Now, this is the largest deal Microsoft has made since the LinkedIn acquisition. Obviously, there's also that, I don't think that Discord deal has finalized as well. Again, when we break out Microsoft's earnings, which will appear on 4/28, we've done Microsoft for nearly a year now, where we've looked at all their quarterly earnings. One of the things that we've always talked about on that show is this is a company, I think they had like $40 or $50 billion in cash. It might be even more than that. It was like, what were they going to do with that? I didn't necessarily see them buying back a bunch of shares or raising the dividend any significant amount more than they normally do. So I felt like they were going to do acquisitions because, unlike Facebook and Amazon and probably Apple as well, it was going to be hard for some of those other companies to do acquisitions with their cash because they have regulators. I mean, Google and Facebook have testified in front of Congress like maybe a half dozen times over the last year or two. It's going to be tough for them to get that past regulators, where Microsoft can kind of fly under the radar here and get some of these big time deals through. And that's what we've seen here with Nuance Communications. Now, moving on to Tesla, start of the week, 692. This one's just moving up the hill as it's moving towards earnings. Big day here on the channel and in the stock market in general. 4/28, you have Tesla and Microsoft reporting earnings, and Facebook. And the following day, you will have Apple and Amazon. Again, hit that subscribe button here on the channel if you haven't already, because we will be bringing you all the news and information on these ones. So 692, Tesla was in the beginning of the week. And guess what? Now it's at $740. Although ARK Invest, one of the biggest cheerleaders behind Tesla, actually sold some Tesla shares. I remember I did a video a month or two ago when ARK Invest sold some Tesla, and you could see these Tesla nerds, their heads just exploded at the thought that Cathie Wood would actually have to sell some shares. But that's what she did. And it'll be interesting to see if today on Friday she sells some more. It's usually that information doesn't come out for another couple hours, although she went big time into Coinbase, and we'll see if she's able to buy some more shares of that stock as well. If you're a fan of our channel, on our Saturday show, we'll be talking about Coinbase, talk about a little bit about Dogecoin. I mean, some of this stuff has just been blowing up this week. We'll talk about that on the show, along with bank earnings as well. That will be our Saturday show, which has a similar format to this one. Now, moving on to the stock chart, Facebook has just been ripping like we've talked about, although it found some sellers here up at about the 315, call it 316 range, and it retraced almost all the way back down to what I would consider kind of a support level here at 304, 305. Be interesting to see what happens over the next week, as we're kind of in a holding pattern until Facebook or some of these companies start to report earnings. So we'll see what happens with Facebook. But this 305 level, 306 level is kind of a natural place for the stock to rest. If it breaks 305, 306, well, now you're back down in this range, and anybody's guess where it could be. I think the mid 290s is a stopping point, because we don't have a lot of price action in between here. Now, a boost back up to 316 and over. And look, this one could be off to the races. Now, Apple is just churning higher. Nice, steady uptrend, almost unabated, uninterrupted, all the way up to this 134 range. I have 138 marked out in here. It might not be the most accurate spot. I think we've got a spot now right here, right at 134. So that could be some resistance, could be some support. We'll see what happens. Again, Apple doesn't report for another 13 days, so they've got all next week to trade. It could potentially continue to move higher. All these stocks, I'm really interested to see what happens. Have we just pulled forward the earnings reports that we're going to see in about 2 weeks? Have we just pulled that forward? Or when those earnings report hits, can it move these stocks to all-time highs? Okay, we've seen it with Facebook. We've seen it with Microsoft. We've seen it with Google. We've seen it with even Amazon, which we'll get to here in a minute. Apple's not there yet. All-time highs on Apple is at $145. That's still $11 over this one. So I think you could Apple still probably some meat on the bone if they're able to continue this momentum. This momentum in the stock has been extraordinarily strong. Now, Amazon touched what I believe are all-time highs right in that 34, call it 34.40 range over the last day. It really did it intraday and got rejected very quickly. But Amazon's on a gigantic steep uptrend. And boy, my portfolio has been loving it since it is overweight Amazon. So what I'm looking for with this one is a push above 3,400, or 3,440 to be more exact. Can it do it before earnings report? If it does, well, it could be off to the races on this one. We could be heading up here to 3,500, and then this 3,440 could be a support level on the way back. Now, if we get rejected here, there's a spot here at 3,300. Wouldn't necessarily be dying to get into any of these stocks. But look, man, when they come down, this is why we always talk on the show. When these stocks retrace, I think people think I'm just like a broken record on here. It's a buying opportunity, okay? That is because these stocks almost always, just always bounce back. And it is in large part because when we analyze the fundamentals of these stocks here in a week or two, you'll just see these companies just generate so much cash and have so much cash flow, have so much profit, have so much cash on the balance sheet, have so much ability just to squash their competition at any time they want to. That is why these stocks just continue to go up, and I continue to recommend them. Now, Netflix is the one stock out of all of these that I don't own. It is sitting right in the middle of a range between 540, and we'll call it, actually, we'll put another little spot in here at like 555, call it somewhere in this range here. And so it's sitting right there. I think a pullback to 540 could be a small buying opportunity, although it looks like our shorter term uptrend in this one actually was broken. And now we're kind of going sideways in this one. So we'll see what happens with Netflix. What's interesting is Netflix does report the first out of all these. They're reporting on 420. So it's interesting that the stock basically has started consolidating. I wonder if that is what we're going to see next week with Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, is that we'll just see sideways consolidation as we head into the following week where they'll report earnings. That is what Netflix, at least in this chart, is showing that could potentially happen. Now, speaking of stocks that are just soaring, we're going to have to zoom this. It's just like a staircase with Google. This one just keeps going up and up and up. And there's not much I can tell you here. Okay, do you want to play the momentum? Okay, this reminds me a little bit of Dogecoin. I have people calling me like, should I buy it here? Should I buy it there? I'm like, dude, just do a max thing on the chart and just look at the thing. It's just going up and up and up. Does it really matter if you bought it at 19 cents or 21 cents or 24 cents? I mean, the darn thing going up 100% a day. Now, we're not seeing that type of move with Google, but this one just keeps making higher highs and just high. It's just like, it's like gapping up. And so we'll see what happens. Again, Google reports 427. Have we just pulled forward a ton of gains? This is why I'm watching this closely, because look, if this thing pulls back, if for some reason the earnings report's not as great as what people want or whatever in the moment, well, this thing could sell off, and it could sell off rapidly because we have just been ripping higher. And when you rip higher in something, sometimes you have these big, gigantic pull downs. Okay, a 10, 15, 20% move. Not saying that's likely or probable, but I tell you what, if it does happen, I would definitely, absolutely, 100% be a buyer of Google. Now, moving on to Microsoft. Speaking of all-time high, speaking of a ripping higher, hello, Microsoft just blew off. We had this line here in the sand at 245, blew through that. We're up here at 256, blew through that. Now we're at 260. Same situation here with Microsoft, 428. Do you want to really get in here and buy this one when it's off and running like this and right a week before earnings? Maybe not. Maybe you'd like to see it sideways consolidate. But again, if Microsoft announces earnings and they're not that great or whatever, for some reason the stock sells off, well, there could be buying opportunities because you look at the gaps between these candles. And so when you have a pullback, it is going to want to pull back, at least in this point, all the way back to 245, 250, somewhere in this range right here. That could create a buying opportunity for this one, and in my opinion, would likely be a nice spot. We'll see what happens. These things could just continue to rip higher. Now, Tesla had that big drawdown. Okay, we talked about Tesla, had this big drawdown. I was hoping it would get lower. Unfortunately, the trend reversed and it went higher. okay, because I am not overweight Tesla. Not necessarily a stock I want to be overweight, but I could use a few more shares of this one. But it is in a steady uptrend, okay? This one is making, okay, here's a low, here's a higher low, here's another higher low, and look, we made another higher low. It's just going to continue. We hit our head on 780. That appears to be some resistance for Tesla, at least in the shorter term. 780, a break of 780, and I could almost guarantee you 815. And with any kind of momentum, yeah, you could come back here to all-time highs, which are close to $890, almost $900 in this stock. Now, if for some reason when Tesla reports on 4/28, they disappoint, which I think is going to be difficult to do because they basically telegraph their earnings by announcing production and delivery numbers every month or so. So we already kind of know the delivery story. They could have an acquisition. They could have a merger. They could have a partnership deal. They could announce some interesting ways where they can make more money, like opening up their supercharger stations, which apparently they've already done, to other car makers. Okay, think the Amazon model. Amazon started AWS for themselves and then open it up to everybody. Okay. I think they're going to do the same thing they've done kind of the same thing with their advertising platform. They're going to do the same thing with their delivery platform, kind of vertical integration and kind of allowing other companies to benefit. I think Tesla's going to do that same thing. They built all these supercharger network. I know our president, Joe Biden, is promising to build more superchargers, but anytime the government is involved in anything, it takes way longer and costs way more than if you had a private company like Tesla do it. So I think the shorter road to resistance for EV car makers is actually using Tesla supercharger stations, which guess what? Would bring more revenue to Tesla without having to sell another car, which is actually difficult to do these days with the chip shortages and things of that nature. So we've got some spots here. 780 is resistance. A break above that, I can almost guarantee you probably 820 on this one. Now we're kind of in the middle of this range. A pullback to 700, even a little bit lower than that, my opinion, could be a buying opportunity because you would still have an uptrend here. Okay. You'd still have an uptrend intact, even if you break kind of below this 670, 680 range. I know there's some technical guys that would argue with me on that one, but I think it could create an opportunity. So that's what we've got. We've got a week ahead with the FAANG stocks outside of Netflix. Netflix does report next week, but all the other FAANG stocks report the following week. So what happens next week? Do you see sideways consolidation? Do you see a pullback? Do they just continue to rip higher? I am going to be watching that very closely because no matter what happens, no matter what happens when they report earnings, it could create buying opportunities because you could have a sell-off if these things kind of ripped a little bit higher than investors want to take on when we get into earnings. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this weekend as well. We'll have the Saturday stock show on Saturday. Hit that subscribe button, that notification bell, that like button, that comment button. It really helps our channel out. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll be back again next week. Good luck with your investments.